In today's video, I'm starting my reading vlog for the month of February, where I am attempting to read my entire physical TBR over the course of this year. My goal for every month is I want to read or attempt to read at least 5 books for my shelves. 2 of these are DNFs and 1 I have finished. So I want to go ahead and update you guys. The first book I'm going to be speaking about in this video is The Loney by Andrew Michael Hurley. I DNF'd this book at 13%. This book was so boring. One of the most boring books I've read in my life, probably. I wasn't finding anything in these pages that was unsettling or that I was questioning. Like, there was nothing about it that I wanted to dig deeper, and there was no like mystery element or horror element. It was just so bland. So that one was a very easy DNF. The next book that I DNF'd was Masterclass by Christina Dulsher. This one I also DNF'd at 13%. It almost felt like a YA dystopian, but told from the point of view of like one of the parents that would be in that dystopian novel. And we're following like this dystopian society where kids they go to school based on their like test scores. And if you rank really low on these scores, you get sent away to some sort of like, I don't know, really bad place. That's what ends up happening to the main protagonist's daughter. She gets sent away because her scores are really bad. I feel like this book is trying to make a commentary on the emphasis that we place on, what are those things called with the bubbles? Standardized tests. I felt like I could see the commentary that was being made here, and I feel like it is relevant, but the actual story itself was not compelling me. I just feel like this is not a book for me. It wasn't doing anything for me. Like, I feel like this is a book for a parent whose kid is trying to get into college. The book that I have actually finished, I didn't DNF it, was Looker by Laura Sims. I had really, really high expectations because this is the same author who wrote How Can I Help You, which was one of my favorite books last year, and this is her debut novel. I can really see how much she has grown between this and that. I rated this book 2 stars. How much do I get into? It's following a woman who is having infertility issues. So her husband has left her because they can't have a baby, and she is spiraling because of that. And she has a neighbor who is an actress that the woman, becomes obsessed with, and she's like essentially stalking this woman. And she's just a totally unhinged main female protagonist that we see a lot these days. And it's this sort of thing that I feel like Ottessa Moshfegh does a lot. A lot of people do this, where they try to make this character as gross and disgusting as possible just for the sake of writing a really unhinged, gross, unlikable female character, which is fine, okay? I just wanted more from this. It doesn't have the depth that I feel like Laura Sims was able to get to in her second book, How Can I Help You? And this was lacking that for me. It felt like we were just writing a really bad main character just for the sake of it, and there was no deeper meaning to it. I also do not love that this character essentially goes off the rails because of her infertility issues. I don't love seeing that storyline for women. I would have rather it come from something else than the fact that she cannot get pregnant, and then that makes her like go on this mental breakdown, you know? Also, there is some very intense animal cruelty in this that instantly got my rating down to a 2. Very unnecessary. Like, could we have just left that out? I honestly think if she had just left that out, this might be a 3. I don't know. Maybe not. Just Can we not with that, please? Okay. So far, we have 3 books down for the month of February. It is currently February 17th as I am filming this, and so we still have a little bit more time, and I probably will try to unhaul a few more books. I would like to unhaul a few every month. I'll try to read at least 5 and then also unhaul a few every month. So I have quite a few updates to share with you guys. I have some more books that I tried reading and DNF'd, and I have a little stack here of books that I'm going to be unhauling. The first book I have right here is one that I know is one of the oldest books on my physical TBR. I was very close to just straight up unhauling it. I'm kind of in the mindset at this point of if a book has sat on my shelf for over a year, I haven't read it, I haven't touched it, taken it off the shelf, haven't even had like the thought in my mind to read it, I need to just unhaul it. And if I have a desire to read it in the future, hey, I can always borrow that book from the library. But I don't want to hold on to those books that are just sitting there, like occupying my physical space, you know? And so the book that I'm talking about is Hench, and I read up until 29% of this book, and I just knew that it wasn't gonna end up being a favorite or something that ultimately I was gonna decide to hang on to. In this world, superheroes and villains are real. Superheroes cause a lot of issues logistically for civilians, because if you think about movies like the Avengers, when they are defeating villains and they're just like throwing each other into buildings, you know, people get hurt from those situations. So that's kind of like the take of this book, is the superheroes are kind of the bad guys. I feel like the idea here was really fascinating and had a very original concept to it. A lot of parallels to that of things that we see in our actual real life world, where some of the people that we look at as real life superheroes, who are supposed to be the protectors of us, who are meant to be the people who serve the public, are actually the corrupt ones and actually the real villains. So I thought that was a really cool, interesting take. And there was nothing that I can say that was really wrong with this book or bad with it, but I got to 29% in and it was starting to drag quite a bit, and I was finding myself losing interest in the story. I could tell that if I continued reading it, my enjoyment would probably only go down, and this book would not get more or higher than a 3-star rating for me. And I'm really trying to lean more and more into DNFing and really cut myself off at a point where I can tell if a book is going to be very mediocre, stop reading it, and move on to the next thing. Going through and looking at my ratings of the books I've read this year, I have a majority of 4 and 5-star books that I've read this year. By getting myself to DNF more and more and more, I feel like I'm going to find more books that are favorites that I get a ton of value and a ton of joy from. And like for this one, while there was nothing really wrong or bad with it, I just didn't feel a real need to see where the rest of the story went. I will be unhauling this. The next book that I tried reading and decided to DNF was Before the Ruins by Victoria Gosling. I got to 18% into this book. A gripping, multi-layered debut in the tradition of Tana French and Donna Tartt, about 4 friends, an empty manor, and a night that will follow them for the rest of their lives. This book to me was very slow paced, and I found that it was focusing so much on the relationships between the characters, and I wanted a little bit more plot, a little bit more happening. This is one of those books that I just wanted to scream at the entire time to get to the point. When I'm feeling like that, I would rather use my time to stop reading this and move on to another book on my TBR that might be a hit, you know, might be an instant hit that could end up bringing me a lot more value than what I'm getting from this, especially if I chose to continue and put more of my time into it. So DNF for this one at 18%. The final book that I picked up and ended up DNFing was The Sisters of the Winter Wood by Rena Rosner. I've been doing this a lot lately, where I will go and I will just sit on the floor in front of my bookshelf and I will just stare at my bookshelves. I will skim all the shelves and think very intentionally and consciously about each book on my shelf. And especially if it's an unread book, and I will think, okay, do I genuinely, honestly see myself ever reading that, ever finishing it? Do I still actually have interest in this book? And I'm doing this like at least once a month, looking at all the books and being very intentional about, do I want to hold that in my physical space anymore? I don't regret like bringing these books into my home and housing them on my shelf for a period of time, because when I bought this book, I was excited about it, and it gave me joy just to pick this book up and bring it home and have that like hope in my heart that, you know what, book might end up being a favorite because it reminds me of one of my favorites. And that little spark right there brought me some joy. So I don't regret, you know, holding on to some of these books for so long. But this one was on the chopping block, and unfortunately I only made it into 3% of this book when I could tell that it really was going in a direction that was not for me. This book is marketed as adult fiction. I was finding through my own reading experience that it was reading more on the side of young adult. If you are a huge like fantasy, especially like romantasy, if you love a lot of romance in your fantasy books, I think that you would really love this. But that's not my genre, and so I'm just saving myself the time, and I will be unhauling this one. Next, let's go ahead and get into the books that I have decided to just unhaul. I'm not even going to attempt to read them. They are just going to be unhauled. The first two, I'm going to talk about these together. So they are both by the author Mary Downing Hahn. I have Wait Till Helen Comes and The Ghosts of Crutchfield Hall. These are both like middle grade horror books, and I am interested in them. I know that this one especially has a lot of hype to it, but for some reason my library does not carry the audiobook for either of these two, which I'm really shocked by. My library does have other audiobooks from this author, but it does not have either of these two, and I'm shocked by this one because I know that Wait Till Helen Comes is kind of like a modern classic. I was very interested in the both of these because I know that they are both paranormal horror middle grade books, and I love ghost stories, but I'm simply never ever ever going to sit down and read these. You know, I'm not going to do it. I want the audiobook, and so I will be unhauling these two as well as the next one for the same reason, honestly, and that is The Last to See Me by M. Dressler. I recently picked this one up from a library book sale. I kind of have a method where I go through all the books and I'm grabbing things and adding things to my bag. And then before I leave, I will like fine tune my bag and re-go through all the books, like read what they're all about. I'll look them up on Goodreads, see the reviews. When I went to this book sale where I picked this book up, we only had a very short amount of time there. So I did not get to do that like double check and make sure that I really wanted everything that I put in my bag. First of all, my library does not have the audiobook. Okay, so that's strike one, that I'm probably never ever going to pick this book up and read it if I don't also get to listen to the audiobook while I read it. Number two, this is actually a trilogy, and I'm not a huge series reader. I prefer reading standalones. There are a couple of series that I am reading and I am enjoying reading them, but I don't like to really invest my time into a lot of series. I prefer a standalone. I almost feel like I might need to defend myself a little bit at this point because I feel like some people might hear me keep saying, I want the audiobook. For some people, it's very helpful to them to have an audiobook, and I am one of those people. So if you're hearing me say time and time again that I know I'm not going to read this or any of these because I can't get my hands on the audiobook, I just want to put that perspective out there as well, that I have a very, very difficult time reading a book only physically because I find that my brain will I will reread the same sentence and my brain will not process it. And I'll find that I've read like an entire page and I haven't processed anything that has happened. However, when I have the audiobook and I can at least listen while I read along, I'm able to process and make that picture in my mind of what is going on. There are some books that I have dedicated to reading only physically because I could not get my hands on the audiobook. It takes a huge amount of focus and mental energy and effort for me to do that, to read a book completely physically without also the assist from the audio. I know that there are a few books on my shelf that I'm going to have to do that with eventually because I can't find the audio. My library does not have the audio. The hold times are outrageous and I wouldn't be getting the audio anytime soon. So I know that there are a few books on my shelf that I'm going to be forced to read physically. I would rather put that energy that I know is going to take me to read those into the books that I'm like deeply, deeply interested in. And these three right here are not ones that I'm deeply, deeply interested in. They were kind of like impulse buys from a library book sale, so I don't feel bad about unhauling them. I just had to give a little brief defense right there for audiobooks and readers who, I don't want to say need an audiobook, but almost need an audiobook to be able to focus. I have to reread things again and again and again to get it through what is happening. But I don't know why it is. When I can hear something audibly, my brain can process it so much more clear and quicker and easier. So I think we all just have different ways of processing information, and I don't think that anyone should be looked down upon for that. Just let people live. Let people read however they want to, you know, it doesn't affect you. Now let's go ahead and get into the wrap-up portion here. This is the amount of books that I was able to get through from my physical TBR in the month of February. So all of these unreads will be subtracted from my total. And here's the thing, only one single book is one that I actually read the entire thing cover to cover, and that was Looker by Laura Sims, and I ended up not enjoying this book at all. Then all the rest of these were either DNF'd or just unhauled. So this really does as well. This is a lesson, okay? This stack of books right here is a lesson about me needing to be a lot more intentional when I am buying books. I will probably end up listing all of these books on Pango, so if anybody is interested in them, you can check out my Pango. But if they don't sell on Pango, I will end up, you know, donating them to a little free library. In the last video, my January check-in for this project, I ended up at a total of 89 books on my physical TBR. So these are all going to be subtracted from my physical TBR. One other fun thing that I have done now is I have actually created a shelf on my Goodreads, and I have logged every single book that lives on my physical TBR. I have logged it into a shelf on Goodreads. So now I should always have a very accurate number, because I definitely counted wrong when I first started this challenge, and now this will prevent me from ever having my numbers being off. So in the last video that I left off in January, we were down to 89 books. I am now down to 80 books on my physical TBR. 80 books is still a lot. That is a large number. It sounds daunting, but I am making really good progress every single month. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. But other than that, I will see you in the next one.